Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. This is Ben Kinney, joined today with Bob Stewart and Chad Himes. Say something.
Hello.
Every time, a little bit different. We are going to stick in the topic of money today because we've been asked more than ever in our Facebook group, through emails, texts, calls, and this guy peeking through my bathroom window. The big question, ladies and gentlemen, what is your favorite book on money or wealth building and investing? And I was beating my head against the wall. Chad, I was thinking, like, what's the book? And here's the answer. There isn't the book.
Ooh.
For lots of reasons. One, there's so many differing opinions. But two, wealth is not something that's created through one channel. What I found when reading literally over 100 different books about wealth building, money, taxes, investing, real estate, all that kind of stuff, right, was that everybody has a bias, an opinion, right? Some direction they put you in. The real estate guys talk about real estate all the time, and the tax people spend all their time talking about taxes, and life insurance guys pitch life insurance, and retirement people pitch their 401ks and IRAs, right?
Stockbroker is going to sell me on stocks, right?
It's it. So there's all these differing opinions. So I'm not going to tell you what my favorite book on building wealth is.
Aww.
In fact, I'm not even going to jump in to my favorite books. I'm going to talk today about 10 great books that you could read that would help you on your journey of building wealth. Now, in the wealth series that we just ended, you guys heard that my definition of wealth is the ability to do what I want, when I want, with who I want. It's not fancy cars or Ferraris, which brings us to the first book.
Okay.
One of the books that I give out, probably more than anything, especially to people that I feel like are working really hard or living above their means, is Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh, great book.
Great book.
Yeah.
Written by Robert Kiyosaki. His first, and Robert's written a bajillion books, right? But his first real home run book tells the story of two dads. One is the rich dad and one is the poor dad. And they're not who you think. The poor dad is the one that had the nicer house, the fancy cars, that made more money in his job, J-O-B, right? And the other dad didn't have the fanciest things, didn't spend the money on the fancy stuff, invested his money. And the book goes through this journey about the money mistakes that the poor dad made and the lessons that Robert learned from his rich dad about how the rich dad actually made his money. Now, in this book, you'll hear the message that being rich, what it really means is not worrying about money, not worrying about paying your bills. It doesn't mean driving a Ferrari. It doesn't mean having the biggest house or the nicest house. The book helps you understand a philosophy that we hold dear to our hearts, which is, how do you move from just having income to having assets that create income? The cash flow conversation was the first introduction to that.
Yep. I love it. I mean, he talks in the book about the difference between rich and poor people, right? It's rich people have assets, like you just mentioned, and poor people have liabilities. So they're sitting there, obviously, in the situation we talked about a lot in the wealth series of assets versus liabilities and being able to figure out all that stuff. And with your definition, Ben, you're absolutely right. It puts us in a position to be able to do what we want, when we want, with who we want, if we're in a position of assets, not in a position of liabilities.
Some of those liabilities are cool, right? Like the Ferrari's cool liability, but it's not going to help you get to Ben's definition of freedom.
No, it's not going to help you with building wealth. It's just going to help you have a really cool Ferrari that depreciates in value every single day and, is there looking cool for a little while and then wears off. Because even a Ferrari owner after a week is probably like, all right, I've driven my Ferrari. There's still speed limit signs out there. I can only go so fast in this country. What am I going to do with it now? I've shown it off to everybody.
Yeah, been there, done that for sure, right?
Right.
In this book, the first book, Chad.
Yep.
Here's what I want to explain. It doesn't mean that I endorse, promote, or believe all the same philosophies that Robert Kiyosaki does. For instance, he talks a lot about how owning a house is a liability, not an asset. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I believe some of the greatest amounts of wealth for the mass majority of the population is created through owning real estate. Now, the difference is that my belief is you buy real estate, live in it, a couple years later, move out, keep that real estate, rent it out, then it becomes an asset, and you move into your next one. And we'll talk about that, and we've talked about that in the past, but we'll talk about it more in the future.
And you're going to say that about all these books. As you said, the people who wrote these books each have their own niche, each have their own place that they're featured. You're going to believe in some of the things. You might not completely support everything that every one of these books is saying because they're not talking to each other where you are by learning from each of these books.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, Robert has a unique place on today's episode because he actually shows up like one other author.
Yep.
Twice on the list.
Right.
And that's because the second book that I'd recommend is Cash Flow Quadrant.
Absolutely.
Simple, easy concept that he talks about how do you transform from being an employee, otherwise known as having a job,
Yep.
into being self-employed, where you wake up every single day and your mantra is we do it.
Right.
And that is in what they call the active income side of the quadrants, where you're still trading time for money. But what you want to do is you want to move into the passive income side of the quadrants, into the last two squares. And the third one is becoming a business owner. You know that you're a business owner because you wake up every day and you have the ability to say, they do it.
Right.
Remember, in the first side of the quadrants, in the active sides, they say, I do it if you're an employee,
Yep.
right? Or we do it if you're self-employed, like employed by your own business. Well, how do you know, are you in a business or are you self-employed? Will your business continue to run if you don't show up? If you got sick, Bob, or you broke your leg, if you weren't there, would it continue?
It's the best definition.
Right? Would it go down? What would happen? If your business can sustain or grow without you there, you have a business. If not, you're self-employed by your business.
Right. You've got to practice, as many medical people have. If the dentist goes away, there's no one there to do the dental work.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ben, you've taken us through the quadrant of employee to self-employed to business owner, but there's a fourth piece to the quadrant.
It's the my money does it box. That's where you become an investor, and the proceeds from your jobs or from your business that you own, you're able to invest into assets that create
Cash flow.
cash flow. Exactly. Thank you, Bob. This is what you want. Investor box are people like Warren Buffett, where the vast majority of their net worth comes from assets growing and them keeping that money in there so it can compound and grow bigger and bigger and bigger because they're buying investments that are assets that create income.
And Ben, you can be in multiple boxes. You
could
can be someone who is an investor having your money work for you while you still are self-employed and have that job that goes with it to continue moving through the quadrant again and again and again.
We are all self-employed or employed by the poorly paying, zero income Win, Make, Give podcast, right?
Bob, you get paid by this?
No, zero income, he said.
Zero, right? That's our employee. We have to show up. If we don't show up, the show does not go on.
Sure.
And there's other boxes that we exist in. The goal over our lifetime and our career is to move through that. Now, those are two key books written by the same person, very easy to understand, very easy to comprehend and to implement into your world.
So before you're sitting there worrying about this while we're going through this, we will share this list in our Facebook group. So make sure you're in our Facebook group. It's facebook.com/group/winmakegive. Because when this episode goes live, we will post a list of these books for you so you don't have to sit here writing down each title and then worrying about going and searching for them. So Ben, you've talked about Robert Kiyosaki. Book number 1 and book number 2 are great foundational books when it comes to just wealth building. What's book number 3 on your list? Because we love your lists.
We're going to talk about investing specifically in the stock market. And Bob, one of the books that you and I talk about a lot is The Simple Path to Wealth. What does that tell us?
Well, The Simple Path to Wealth was written by a guy named J.L. Collins, who's an influential blogger inside of the FIRE movement, Ben. And We interviewed a guy recently on the podcast that was a subscriber to this methodology, which is essentially FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And so inside of Colin's book, he talks primarily about investing in paper assets, stocks, bonds, 401ks, these kinds of things, right? Where the simple concept is we're using index funds of these low cost kind of financial instruments, and then letting the power of the financial markets multiply our wealth over time. Compound interest, anyone? Like, that's a discussion that we've had many times, right? So one of the things to me about this specific book, and Tony Robbins, we this isn't one of the 10, but we talked about Unshakable from Tony Robbins. These two books both have very similar concepts. Inside of The Simple Path to Wealth, there's a lot of talk around like the psychology of savings, of even investing, and for me, that was a really powerful aspect of this book, because I think, especially when you think about FIRE, which is this idea of like a big component of FIRE is the idea of having really high rates of savings on your income. And there's a lot of psychology behind that, right? A certain lifestyle that I live. And, he talks in the book about like Mike Tyson as an example. And the guy's made, he'd made $300 million and he ended up bankrupt, or, living this certain lifestyle. And a lot of us have lifestyles that don't allow us to have these higher rates of savings. So it's a great book, just really, but inside of the book, as he gets into the different financial instruments, there's super specific, like actionable ideas that he presents around, retirement account options and even taxes, or like how you take distributions and the distribution strategies around, retirement. So it's a really, really powerful book, but again, focused specifically on things like paper assets and how you actually invest in them. There's a really great quote in this book, Ben, where he says at some point, stop thinking about what your money can buy and start thinking about what your money can earn. And then think about what the money that it earns. Compound interest, right? So
bringing that back, Bob.
Yeah,
so,
really
so
powerful
good.
book.
So if you were sitting around saying, all right, I understand that I have to have a 401k or a stock account or an IRA or all these other instruments, but I don't know what to do with it, and you feel lost in that subject, read The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. Or if you're a Tony Robbins fan, read Tony Robbins' Unshakable. They basically say the same thing, but I thought The Simple Path of Wealth kind of walked you through the history of things like index funds and these financial instruments in a way better way. So Bob, thank you for sharing those two suggestions. Along that same line, the next book actually was recommended by somebody in the Win Make Give Facebook group directly to me, and I got the opportunity to pick it up, and it's a super quick read. It's The Power of Zero by David Mcknight. And the whole purpose of this book is to understand how to get to the 0% tax bracket, meaning you pay
Zero.
nothing.
I can do that math.
Right? So that you can transform your retirement. It dives into two key concepts. That Roth IRAs are the best game in town because they can grow tax-free. Second, that you should consider life insurance retirement plans. And there's a lot of benefits to life insurance plans when you pick the right one that have a lot of flexibility to grow tax-free. And they can be used in many ways in retirement. I highly recommend, if you have any curiosity about life insurance, that The Power of Zero might be your first stop. But don't just leave it there. Read about it, read more, find other books that contradict it, and make your own decision.
And another place that they can go, Ben, is because there's a lot of people as they read these books, it's not going to sink in. They're going to have to read the book multiple times. You've got this gift. We have this fun opportunity of breaking things down. And we are going to be bringing the investing series where we're going to be talking about a lot of these things. We're just laying some groundwork for them by putting these books out in response to the wealth series. Yet as the investing series comes, you're going to build on the information that's found in a lot of these books that they might be reading, that when they're confused or have questions, hold on, we're going to bring you some of those answers in the simple way that you do a great job of explaining things.
Yeah, the models, the systems, and the plans into each one of these subjects.
And if they want to be on our investing series, Ben, they should be visiting winmakegive.com/investing so they can get signed up now and get an alert when that thing's ready to start.
And for free. It's a no-cost thing.
There you
we're
go
not selling
again.
anything once
That's
again.
why we can't pay Bob.
Hey,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
going on here?
All right, Ben, so let's keep going down your list of books. You've taken us through Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant, Simple Path to Wealth, Unshakable, Power of Zero. What's next on that stack you've got in front of you?
For those of you that keeping track, because we said 10 of the best books.
We did.
Remember, we're not counting Unshakable. So don't call me yelling, there's actually 11. We're
It's
not
a
counting
bonus
that
book.
one.
Yeah,
we're not
bonus
counting
book.
that one. So we started off with, let's just think about money in general and changing our mindset around money, which is why we started with 2 of Robert Kiyosaki's books. Then we went into 3 books specifically around financial instruments,
Okay.
Retirement accounts, life insurance, index funds, that sort of stuff. Now, let's talk about business.
Okay.
And if I was to give you 3 books that would change your world about business, first one would be Profit First
Oh, yeah.
by Mike Michalowicz. Profit First says, is decide how much money you want to take out of your business and take it out first and make your expenses, your payroll, and your growth all happen with what's left. We interviewed a guy at one of our live events named Bob Pritchett. He's the founder of Faith Life Bible Software. And Bob said a very similar message to Mike. He said, I decided to make profit a line item in my budget.
So smart.
I'm going to make sure that my business pays me a certain amount every single year. So if you're running a business and it's not giving you the amount of money that you want to live on every year because it's being eaten up by rent and payroll and taxes and utilities and supplies and growth and all those sort of things, I want you to go read Profit First with Mike Michalowicz. It's a winner.
Episode 9, Ben, was
Episode
that
9.
interview? Episode 9, if
Episode
you want
9.
to hear them.
Now, we've heard this phrase, no one succeeds alone. No one succeeds alone. So if you were thinking about business or just wealth building in general, here's a secret that I want to tell you all. I own almost 100% of nothing. I have partners in real estate. I have partners in my company, some my minority, some majority, some equal partners. If you were to read a book about building something big but not doing it on your own, you would read an older book. It's probably going to cost you $60 or $80 to buy it because it's out of print, right? You're going to go to Amazon and you're going to look this book up by Robert Sobel, and it's called Trammell Crow Master Builder. Trammell Crow, one of the largest commercial real estate owners of all time. He was an accountant to start, I think in Dallas, when he started getting into real estate development, somewhere around his early 30s. He was an individual that didn't have massive college education, but he had a huge appetite for reading. And he'd read anything that he could get his hands on. He was a learner. And he served 5 years in the Navy, but he came off with this philosophy of how do you build wealth by owning things with a partner. His theory was that a person who earns a salary won't work as hard as a person who owns part of the deal. He believed that when you add youth and energy, that individuals will work harder if they have some ownership, some skin in the game. He went out looking for a specific type of person. He was always looking for a good guy or girl, the kind of person he said that he'd have a beer with, somebody with brains, but had a high ethical standard. And he would go out and become partners with them. He didn't own one commercial building or 2 commercial buildings or 3 commercial buildings. The story goes that he had an employee, one of his first employees comes in there and says, hey, I've enjoyed working for you, but I want to go off and do the same thing that you do. And he said, well, why don't you do it with me? So instead of losing that important person, that person went off and they became 50-50 partners in the next investment. He realized that was a model and he did it time and time again until he actually built one of the largest commercial real estate empires in U.S. history.
And I can see where you've learned that lesson as you've done that with so many people, bringing them into your world. Folks, before you go buy this book, go see maybe if your parents have it on a shelf. Go see if you can find it anywhere, because I'm searching Amazon while Ben's talking, and a used copy is selling for $85 today. That's the price on Amazon.
You know, it's funny. The paperback version is $130. You can get the hardback for $85.
It's out of print. It's going to be worth $5,000 in 5 years, ladies and gentlemen.
So this is investing right here. Get a copy of this book and hold it. Ben, keep going down the list for us.
Now, the third book in the business category that I really want you to think about, we've already interviewed this gentleman as well.
Episode 44.
Tom Wheelwright, he wrote a book called Tax-Free Wealth. If you're going to make income, you have to understand how to pay less taxes. Tom walks you through the idea that the United States tax code has 40 pages about how to pay taxes and 6,000 pages on how not to pay taxes. And once you understand that the tax code is actually a tool and a roadmap for paying less taxes, you won't be afraid of it, especially if you learn how to hire the right type of financial advisor, accountant, tax expert in your world. It's one of the single most impactful books that I've ever read about my financial world, because in my business, in my life today, my number one expense is taxes.
We talked about this in the Wealth series when we had Tom on, that on average people pay somewhere between 10 and 40% more in taxes than they should. And during the Wealth series, Ben, we had people go back and like run those numbers against your last couple of years of taxes and see like how much extra money could you have had there to invest, right?
Exactly.
Legally.
So, Chad, you have a lot of experience in this next subject.
Yes.
We just talked about business in general. I gave him 3 good books: Profit First with Mike Michalowicz, the Sobel book, Trammell Crow, Master Builder, and then Tom Wheelwright's Tax-Free Wealth.
Yep.
The last subject that we're going to talk about in financial books today is actually real estate. Yep. And it's something you have a lot of experience in yourself.
Sure.
Let's talk about the 3 real estate books that we think would be a great start for anybody listening to our podcast to dump in and learn. Maybe which one do you want to start with?
Millionaire Real Estate Investor is a powerful one, written by Gary Keller.
And
Jay Papasan, of course.
And
Dave Jenks.
Yeah, 3 authors came together to write one of the most important books on real estate investing that you'll ever read. It's a bright blue book, and it's probably 1.5 inches thick. It's a manual. The first 146 pages are about wealth building, money, understanding, compound interest, all the stuff that we talk about. The rest of the book is actually about investing in real estate. What should we know about this book?
You know, Ben, before we even dive into the book, just know this about real estate, right? Andrew Carnegie, one of the guys that everybody thinks about when you think about original wealth in the United States of America, he's quoted as saying 90% of all millionaires became so through owning real estate. So, I mean, if you're not sure where you want to put your money, real estate's probably a great place. In the Millionaire Real Estate Investor, one of the things that they talk about for us is the CTN, okay? And CTN stands for criteria, terms, and network. And what we want you to do is understand that if you're going to get into this, you need to understand what your criteria, your terms, and your network are. You know, this is like Ben's systems. He's always putting all these systems in place. So the criteria is going to define what you would buy. That way, Bob, you're not looking at beach property if that's not what your criteria is. If you want if you want duplexes, that's what you're looking at. If you want condos and high rises in a big city area, that's what you're looking at. So it's knowing your criteria. Then it's knowing your terms. What are terms that you are willing to take, not willing to take? You should have that prepared in advance when you're dealing with things like this. And then, of course, your network. And I think this is one of the most powerful things. You know, Ben, we've talked to you about this, about how do you find opportunities for investing? And you say, well, you need to know what you're looking for and you need to be prepared for it. One of the key things is your network. If you're not telling your network you're looking for opportunities, no one's going to present them to you. How many times do we find somebody who sells a house and moves that we were like, I would have bought it for you. You could have stayed. Or I would have bought it for you or from you so you could have made that move. It would have been a great investment for me. We need to make sure that we are talking to our network about things like that. So remember, CTN is one of the big things that comes from the Millionaire Real Estate Investor. And then we know that Gary Keller loves his triangles, and he talks about the 4 stages. You want to think $1 million. You want to buy $1 million worth of real estate. You want to then be owning $1 million, and then you want to be receiving. So that's going to be that money that's coming back to you as you build yourself up. And then, of course, Dave, Gary, and Jay finish up at the end talking about, look, once you're there, how do you stay on top? Because, boy, isn't someone always coming to knock those people off the top who are up there? They talk about some great strategies for you of establishing a base camp, protecting your future, funding your future, and then, of course, staying the course. And it's a fantastic, it was such a huge book when it came out as the market was going up, yet everything in that book is still applicable today.
Yeah, we're not just giving you the brand new books. I'm like sitting here smelling these books. And some of these books smell kind of funky.
It smells like the cheeseburger you spilled on it while you were eating.
They've been around for a while. They're bent up, dinged up, scratched up, written on, highlighted. Bob, you ever have a parent that mentioned to you, they're like, you know, if I would have bought that house right there when I was driving around, you know, things, you know, they take their sip of their drink and like, things would be a lot different now.
I've told you, my dad, we've talked about this before on the pod. That was my dad. I can clearly remember as a young child driving through Ashford, Washington, and him pointing out different like pieces of property or, you know, there's the Lions. There's where the Lions Hall is, Bobby. You know, I could have had that piece of property back in 78 for $12,000. You know, yeah, absolutely all the time.
You know, my family was famous for that, right? I could have bought that for $46,000 or whatever that might be. But here's another one that I hear often. I used to own that.
Yep.
I used to own that piece of property, and I sold it. Well, what'd you sell it for? $47,000. What's it worth today? Just out of curiosity. Like, you can't think of a single property that any one of your parents can drive by today where they would say, "Gosh, sure glad I didn't buy that 30 years ago," unless it's sunk into the frickin' ocean, right? Or it's under the Mississippi, right? You can't think of a single property that you say, "Gosh, I'm sure glad I didn't buy that 30 years ago." Because when you hold real estate, right, you build wealth, which brings us to the next book, which is
Hold.
Hold. Who wrote it?
Well, it's a group of people that wrote this one, right? So obviously Jay Papasan and Gary Keller were involved with it. And then they brought in some experts in the field at the time, Steve Chater, Janice Doughty, and then, of course, Jim and Linda McKissick. Love them. Wonderful people. And they talk in this book, Ben, about the power of holding. And what they're talking about is how to obtain financial freedom through real estate. And they're going to show you the 5 steps. And that's how you find the properties. So we just talked about that even in MREI and Millionaire Real Estate Investor, right? Having that criteria. How to analyze an offer, which is something you do really well when it comes to, is this going to be worth it? How to then buy, okay? Then how to manage a property, right? Because you want to make sure that you have a property, you know, that you have to manage until it's completely paid off, and then you could just have it sit there without that. But you have to manage it to get the equity out of it. And then, of course, grow your way to wealth and financial freedom. And there's a great quote in the book that says this. It says, the bottom line is that if you can do your homework, you too can be a genius. It's just not that difficult.
That's so good. You know, what I love about this book, this isn't a philosophical book about leadership written by somebody that wants to talk about leadership that hasn't led anybody ever.
Nope.
Right? This is a book written by real estate investors who built their wealth holding real estate themselves. And this is a book about the model on how, when, and why to do that. Jimmy, Linda, Janice, Steve, right? Jay and Gary, they do this. They live this, right?
I wish I had that lesson way earlier in life. I wish that book came out as early as some of the other real estate books that I've read, because, gosh, I wish I still had every property that I at one point had owned.
Now, these are 2 great real estate books, but some of you are waking up and saying, that's awesome. I get it. I understand, but I can't afford to buy or invest in real estate in my market.
That's me. I mean,
you live in Seattle.
I live in Seattle, and we do have an investment property there. It's the value of it's crazy, and I'm considering right now, like, our next investment property. It's not happening in Seattle. It's just not, right? So it's going to be somewhere
Long
further.
distance, maybe?
Long distance.
Long distance. Yeah, because we live in San Francisco. We live in Seattle. We live in Austin. We live in whatever these markets. And there isn't the right deal that creates the cash flow that we want. So you got to go long distance. Another friend of mine, David Green, he's one of the co-hosts of the Bigger Pockets podcast, who I've been a guest on there. Those are incredible people and a smart podcast, one of my favorite to listen to. David Green wrote a book called Long Distance Real Estate Investing. One of the individuals that wrote a review for this, another friend of mine, David Osborne, he said, it's a common misperception in real estate investing that you should only buy where you live. What David did in this book is he put that myth to rest. If you're thinking about investing, but your market may not be the right market, your market is too hot or not suited for buying or holding, you should consider investing out of the area, which I've done myself. In the last couple of years, we've bought in Utah, California, Texas, just made an offer in Florida. You go where the deals are, where you can afford to invest and will give you the best cash flow.
Have you ever actually been to Florida?
Unfortunately, yes. It's the only reason I say that.
You don't get any farther from here, and you love travel like that.
I love other states and other places. I hate warm, so I would love to go there in the winter. So here are 10 books plus one
11.
bonus that you can't count that you should think about if you want to get smart about wealth. Tom Wheelwright said, if you want to master tax, you got to understand your facts. Right. And if you want to understand wealth, you got to become a student of wealth. So I want you to take some time, consider reading Rich Dad Poor Dad if you hadn't, Cash Flow Quadrant, The Simple Path to Wealth, The Power of Zero, Unshakable, bonus book, Trammell Crow, Master Builder, Tax-Free Wealth with Tom Wheelwright, The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, Hold, Long Distance Real Estate Investing. These aren't my favorite books. They're all great books. They're 10 books that help change my perspective on wealth building, and they're awesome. I recommend them. You should read them. Chad, how do we end every call?
Well, we want to remind you don't have to write all those books down as we went through them, because if you just visit facebook.com/groups/WinMakeGive, you'll find the post in there. You'll be able to find these books and links to them so you can just easily get your hands on, well, most of these books, as one's going to be a little difficult for you to get your hands on. In the meantime, we hope that you're remembering to rate and review our podcast wherever it is you're listening to podcasts. We hope that you've subscribed. We hope you've shared it with a friend. We hope you go back to the Wealth series. You can check out the Wealth series at winmakegive.com/wealth. And we hope you also register yourself to get ready for the Investing series at winmakegive.com/investing. Until our next episode, remember, wash those hands, and as always, do good.